Well, there you go. Have you bought hook, line and sinker all of his promises? Do you think they'll work? Is this sending you running to the ballot box when the general election comes to put a cross next to the Labour candidate's name? Well, before you make your decision, let's get some insider expertise in all of this and speak to Henry Bolton, who's an international border control expert. Henry, I mean, my big question, listening to that, I don't think for 1 minute it's going to stop what is a huge international network of criminality connected to some pretty sophisticated and cynical regimes and operations. I don't think that, you know, the UK doing its bits to bust the gangs is going to somehow stop the international flow of illegal migrants. But it did make me wonder why on earth we're not using enhanced legislation to go after the people traffickers already.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, Alex. First of all, the present situation exists because we have had, as a nation, no overall framework, indeed no overall strategic objectives for what we do on our borders and in terms of immigration. That's why we've had an incoherent set of responses over the last few years from the present government in relation to legislation, ideas, whether it's Rwanda or whatever it might be. There's no coherence amongst all of this. And in that, Sir Keir Starmer is correct. You know, all of these different agencies working in silos need to be brought together. But that said, there is nothing in what he is saying that is going to solve that. He is going to, yes, he's going to axe Rwanda, which I have questioned Rwanda all the way from the beginning. The £75 million that he says he's going to save from that, he's going to put into creating a border security command. Well, I'd like to know what's so different between that, what the difference is between that and the small boats command. Nothing. This is all words. That's my fear. And when he talks about the end of his piece there that you just played, he talked about enhancing border security. I'm sorry, but we've got to start separating asylum policy and immigration policy from borders. Yes, they relate to each other, but I've said many times, border security is about all the cocaine and the heroin that comes across our borders. 97% of the firearms used in criminality in the UK come across our borders. Fishing violations, when we've got foreign fishing vessels coming into the UK, into UK waters to fish that shouldn't be. That's a border violation. The pollution control, these are all border security issues. And simply there is no overarching framework. I see nothing in what he says that's actually going to change the dynamics.
Right. I mean, my fear is by the time that migrants have arrived on our shores, they've already breached our borders. And so the people who are really responsible ultimately of making sure that doesn't happen are France and the numerous countries these migrants have traipsed through to get to Calais, to get on a dinghy, to get to Britain. And certainly us enhancing the way we go about intelligence and questioning and detaining people who are involved in the criminal gangs, well, a lot of them aren't even necessarily going to be in the UK, so therefore it doesn't fall under our jurisdiction. It doesn't fall under any anti-terrorism legislation that Sir Keir Starmer might want to put in place. We'd have no right to go over and detain them if they're in Brussels or if they've gone back to Iraq or, you know, from wherever they may be, and sit them down in a cell in a different country and say, what are you doing? Please stop. So, frankly, it's sort of trying to go after the horse when it's already bolted.
Well, yes and no, Alex. The whole thing is rather European. So it's got a very European feel to it, and I suspect it's also a way of sort of sneaking in further integration into the European Union through the back door, in a sense. If he wants to stop the flow, by the time these economic migrants, because they shop around for where they want to go, by the time they get to Northern Europe or even sort of the Central Europe, they are in the system. It's too late. You've got a problem. You need to cut this off before that, beyond Europe's borders, if you like. Now, we did it, actually, Alex. This is where I'd correct you if I may. We used to do it until Tony Blair pulled the funding on it in 2006. How do I know we used to do it? Because I was one of the people deployed abroad to do this,
so
to disrupt organised crime.
How was it done, and how did we then become so rubbish at it?
Well, let me just, at the moment, we've deployed something called immigration liaison officers, which we had in those days as well, to embassies and so on. They do liaison, they exchange information a little bit. What we did was we actually were embedded in the intelligence and law enforcement agencies of countries along the people smuggling routes. We put in UK intelligence from GCHQ, from MI6, from MI5, from Defence Intelligence. There were 12 different government agencies that all provided the likes of me with intelligence to feed in to domestic intelligence in countries along the route, to fuse it together with their intelligence. We had agreements with these countries to work with us. I was embedded in an intelligence agency and in the national...
So perhaps what Sir Keir Starmer is proposing is good, because he's basically suggesting that we do that again. We use MI5, we use MI6. He's not.
Not in the same way and not to the same degree. He's talking about MI5, which is domestic intelligence, not foreign intelligence. Right. It's foreign intelligence we need to be dealing with. And he's also not talking about projecting further. And I think in that sense, we could work with countries like the French and the Italians who've got reach into North Africa and Sahel and Maghreb to disrupt these. He is not talking about us getting operationally involved, as we used to be until 2006, in the disruption. And the beauty of that is that then those countries conduct the prosecutions in their countries. The people who are in the process, if you like, whether they're being trafficked or whether they're being smuggled, are dealt with there.
Is it possible?
Under their laws.
Is it possible we're not actually using foreign intelligence entities and agents in the MI6 to work with other countries who have a vested interest in stopping this, because perhaps we're not welcome? I spoke earlier to Chris Phillips, who's the former head of National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, and he said to me that a number of countries, or certainly people working in those countries, whose responsibility is to stop the flow of migrants, are complicit in the trade. And so perhaps that is why people aren't exactly rolling out the red carpet for our intelligence officers to go and help them. And I also want to draw your attention back to essentially what's happened in Italy, whereas Meloni was very keen to stop the boat. She wanted to deploy the Italian Navy, and it was the EU themselves who pulled the rug from under her feet on that one and said, you're not allowed to do that. Sir Keir Starmer said that these criminal networks are exploiting cracks between institutions. I would suggest they're exploiting the institutions themselves.
You're absolutely right, Alex. Absolutely. Look, the countries where I worked doing this work, absolutely, members of the authorities, from ministers down, were complicit in this.
What sort of countries? Which countries?
Sorry?
Which countries? I'm just keen to know.
That would be very indiscreet of me to say. There was a lot of... This was... I've mentioned some agencies that were involved in this, and so that might give you a hint. So,
right.
You know, I've got to be a bit careful what I say. Okay. But also, we might want to work with them in future, in the near future. So I don't want to disrupt that. But when you've got that situation, these people also have political enemies. There are criminal groups that they do want to disrupt, and you can work with them if you're wily enough. And at every point, no point, let's say we were working in a country in the southern Balkans, and along a route, working with them in a manner that I suggest is not going to stop the flow. It can disrupt it. It can reduce it. It's like a filter, if you like. Then at the next point, you do the same thing. And then at the next point, you do the same thing again. The point being that the whole object of the exercise is not to stop it, but is to disrupt it, slow it down, reduce it, so that by the time you get to the North French coast, the number of migrants trying to cross the channel is dramatically reduced. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I'm going to bring in Matthew Larser. I mean, it's interesting. This is what we've been wrestling with for most of the day, which is how much agency the UK itself can have over something, which is essentially a huge international chain with, connections to all sorts of different foreign regimes and terrorist organisations and criminal cartels. And that, whatever we do in the UK, we're more dependent, frankly, on the decisions and the operations happening in other countries to stem that flow before they even get to Calais.
Well, I think it's a dual-pronged approach. So, a triple-pronged approach. It's doing what we can in terms of using all the powers that we can give our authorities and making sure that our agencies are working as efficiently as possible, which is why, Keir set out today to have a command that can do that. It's secondly it's having a cross-border collaboration, which is why he set out plans for a new cross-border border control force. And then thirdly, it is working with other countries and having a fresh start with our partners to encourage them to stem the flow. So yeah, absolutely, it's not all about what we do here, but we shouldn't do what we can here.
Henry's saying that he's worried that this is going to sort of get us back into the EU by the back door. There'll be those that argue that actually you need a continent to come together to work on what is a sort of pan-continental issue. But then there'll be other people who remembered Nigel's poster that received, so much attack, basically, showing the sort of snake of migrants ahead of the referendum. But he was right, wasn't he? Because at the time Angela Merkel said, come one, come all, you're all refugees.
No, because that was specifically saying that Turkey was going to join and that therefore you'd have free movement from Turkish people.
But I mean,
Turkey's not going to join, and B, we haven't got free movement.
So they aren't going to join, but they do receive a lot of European funding, and they're definitely up to, they're playing their part in the exodus of people without a doubt. Good old Erdogan in NATO, but no one ever knows his game. Henry, the problem is here, isn't it, that, in many respects, you don't get to work with just France, or you don't get to work with just Italy anymore. You do have to work with Brussels, and so far Brussels haven't really proven themselves to have much mettle or sincerity or backbone when it comes to controlling this.
No, indeed, and you just mentioned Nigel's photo. One of the reasons that he and I and others all campaigned to leave the European Union was so that we could take back control of our borders. We have control now. We've just not decided to exercise that control. But the point was that Brussels actually does have a significant say on what happens on the external borders of the European Union. And so France isn't entirely free as a member of the European Union to make its own decisions in that regard. We have to acknowledge that the French are in that situation. That said, there is no reason why we can't work with the French. I'm all for collaboration. Keir Starmer leads a party that is supported very largely by people who want to rejoin the European Union. He's also his party is supported by people we know, because they've been very vocal about it. They want us to be open to immigration. They're opposed, many of them, not all of them, to us trying to deal robustly with the small boat crossings. He is leading a party that doesn't want to go where he is indicating he is going to go. And I see in that a political manoeuvre to send the message to all the sort of wavering voters, if you like, the Tories who are staying behind, not voting, didn't vote in the local elections, might not vote in the next election. But he's trying to persuade them, those who are motivated by the need to reduce immigration, to vote for him, because he might be more effective than this. That
is his job as leader of the Labour Party, Henry. I'm going to have to stop you there, but thank you so much for joining us and giving your thoughts as an international border control expert.